instead of like this, right? It's actually like this. So there should be more seniors in Tokyo than, say, and we can go to these cities and say, oh, I want Accra in Ghana to, well, let's say they're 12 years old. Maybe they have no idea where Ghana is. So, supplement with other resources. But indeed, there are fewer. This is like 1 dot per every X senior. There are fewer, 3 persons per dot at the largest neighborhood scale. So there are fewer seniors in Ghana, in Accra, for example, and more in Tokyo, which makes sense. New York, London being somewhere in the middle. Interesting. Fascinating. So that's just one of many tools that we'll be able to use together. And let's go ahead and look at migration over space and time. This is another web mapping application. And again, be paying attention to the metadata, know where the data came from. So in this case, it came from, as you can see here, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Okay, so we can dig into that a little bit more and find out where they got their data, especially for countries that have no national census. So again, the metadata is important, and you should spend some time with any web map looking at who created it, why did they create it, when did they create it, how did they create it, how often is it updated, and so on. So here, again, not perfect data, just like every data set that we're using in this course, but very useful, and talk about the limitations and the benefits of using each one of these web mapping tools. So if we view the global migration map, I like the symbology here with the gray base with the orange yellow vectors indicating migration. One of the other things I love about it is that you've got the ability to use a 3D scene. So you think about using 3D scenes not just because they exist, but if you want to show, for example, sea level change or local terrain, watersheds, you want to teach about any of those kinds of things, 3D scenes are great. In this case, I'm going to look at Australia, so I'm going to stop the animation and go to Australia and look at the inbound and outbound. So we've got change over space and time, which is, of course, one of our fundamental themes for APHG and indeed all of geography, change over space and time. I'm going to look at Australia. At one point, it had a very high, one of the highest percentages in the world of immigrants. So since Australia is sort of tucked down at the southern hemisphere there, I'm going to go ahead and toggle this to the 2D view because I actually think this is a little bit easier to understand. So we've got 1990 to 2013, again from the UN Economic and Social Affairs. But at one time you've got inbound largely from Western Europe. But over time, as we scroll through here, watch in particular India and Malaysia and also Myanmar and Bangladesh, you can see that increase from South Asia over time. Certainly still a lot from Western Europe, England, right, the traditional source of a lot of people moving from Australia, and have the students tie to the early 1800s, who actually migrated there in the late 1700s, early 1800s, people from England, but they weren't voluntary, right? They were forced to live there. So the idea is, that trend continued and it's still existing today, but you've got a lot of changes. And then of course the what's where, why is it there, why do we care? Why do we care if immigration changes inbound and outbound? It changes the culture of the country. It changes lots of things. So it's nice to be able to have this tool at your fingertips. Now let's look at outbound and see where people moved to in the case of Australia. It makes sense, New Zealand, United States, but also, a lot of people moved to Germany and even to Russia. Why would that be? So then change it to, I don't know, something like Somalia. Let's look at inbound. Given maybe your background in the economic and food shortages and other challenges, that the political instability and other challenges that they've faced, why are there so few countries, in this case 7 in 2013, sending people to Somalia? And then if your hypothesis is, and I always like to have the students think about, what's your hypothesis based on what you know and what we just talked about in class before you actually go to the web mapping tool? My hypothesis is going to be that the outbound is a lot higher, and indeed it is, not just US, but some surrounding countries even receiving. So migrants from Somalia, 2013, 1.9 million, inbound, 2,000. So a vastly, orders of magnitude difference between the inbound and outbound. Why is that? Get the students to think about, okay, well, why doesn't everybody move if it's so bad there condition-wise? Well, get them to think about a couple of things. One of the things I like to have them think about is, how bad would it have to get in your community, Chicago or wherever you're from, for you to move out of the United States? Like completely leave everybody you know and love and every place you've ever known for your whole life, and you just pack up and move. You don't even get to take your stuff maybe. You just move. Well, Think about how bad would it have to get here. Think about how bad might it be in Somalia in some places for some people. But that's still your home, right? And it's hard for you to leave. And then the second thing I like to get them to think about, do they have the economic means to leave? And if they leave, where are they going to go? Are they going to be able to get a job? Are they going to be able to be a resident in that other country? So lots of things you can teach about here in this one single web map. So another one that I like to have students use is this good old John Snow cholera map. You know, you've seen the map of cholera deaths and so on and so forth. That's just about every geography textbook. I've got it now mapped inside ArcGIS Online, so we can look at things like water pumps and figure out how many cholera deaths were within X distance of the water pump. And then you're going to be Jon Snow and you need to visit every one of the water pumps to measure the water quality and how are you going to route yourself around the city so you can measure them all in 24 hours before other people die. Those are the kinds of things you could do inside a web map, inside a web-based geographic information systems package like ArcGIS Online. So that's another activity that's pretty popular, and it ties into that whole, using maps as more than just reference documents, as analytical tools. And of course, the example that Jon Snow had was, of course, from 1854, predating GIS, but certainly nonetheless rigorous in spatial analysis, looking at patterns, relationships, and trends, which is really central to our course here. So I like to show this picture of ask the students, what is this? It's some sort of computer. You and I know it as an old Mac, and now it's a doorstop that I took in an actual high school. It is being used as a doorstop now. The point is, well, several. A, don't get too locked into your hardware. B, don't get too locked into the software that you're using. All that will change. This is the most important tool of all, right, folks? Your brain. So getting your mind thinking about patterns, relationships, trends, change over space and time. That's why we're using these tools, not just because they're there, but because that actually can foster critical and spatial thinking, okay? So that's why I like to show this image. Now, a couple of other things that might be of value, one of which is why GIS and education matters, and I wrote this for Geospatial World a while back, but it is a nice, hopefully you think it's nice, a concise summary of why GIS and education matters. Why do we care about this stuff? So if this is something you can kind of show your dean, your principal, your department head, your teacher colleagues, why we're doing what we're doing. We're asking deep and rich questions. We're providing content, skills, and perspectives like I talked about earlier. And we're using this not in solo, but we're using it in conjunction with many educators around the world, zeroing in on the whys of where and looking at change, okay? Last thing, I wrote this, 6 ways to increase geoliteracy for ARC User, which is an ESRI publication. And the 6 things are tying geo-awareness to the need for geography education, emphasizing that maps are not just reference documents, not just where things are, but why they are where they are, and why should we care. Also, emphasizing that digital maps are usually more useful and versatile than paper maps. And maps are not just for geographers, they're for city planners, epidemiologists, hydrologists, natural resource planners, public safety people, etc. And then focus on career skills and use that U.S. Department of Labor document that I was talking about earlier, and also have students engage with the tools. It's great if you teachers know a lot about geotechnologies and how to teach with them. That's wonderful, folks. But give them to the students, right? They can fly. Let them fly. Give them these tools and these data sets, okay? With your guidance, I mean, you still have an important role, but you don't have to be the end-all, be-all guru to teach with geotechnology. You don't have to know everything there is to know about geotechnologies to teach with it. I certainly don't know everything there is to know about geotechnologies, but I see the value, and I've also seen how students, when the teacher lets them experiment and tinker and use these tools, they can uncover some pretty powerful connections. And they're thinking. That's the thing. They're not just regurgitating stuff for the test. So hopefully that was of value, folks. Love the fact that we can do this kind of thing in the classroom. So that is again, changing the world through spatial thinking and applied geotechnologies. Again, feel free to get a hold of me in this course. This course is briefly a little touch on economic, urban, and population studies with some rigorous use of modern 21st century geospatial technologies. If there's anything I can do in the future to help you along in your journey, feel free to get in touch. And meanwhile, in this course, we will do a little bit of quiz every week to hopefully build your knowledge and help you to understand, wow, I've made progress here in the course. And B, hands-on activities are probably 75% of the course. We've also got some, I think, rigorous readings and videos to watch, and also some discussion. We really want to build the networking, and I appreciate the networking that you've already done, because that's so key in this, right? We need each other, and it's great to be able to share with a group of like-minded educators. Awesome. So I've had a question or two in the chat box, and I want to address those. First of all, how rigorous am I about, caring about due dates? I'm generally not too caring about those. The only thing I really care about is that you do week 1 content sometime during week 1. You do week 2 content sometime during week 2. In other words, I don't want you to wait till like week 6 and then realize, oh my gosh, I've got tons to catch up on, because you would have a ton to catch up on, because there's a lot of content, and rightly so, in this course. I mean, you've signed on for a rigorous course, and I want to be able to deliver. But that being said, I know people are busy, and from time to time, you have to set this aside for a few days because you've got parent-teacher conferences, or you've got some, PD to do a professional development opportunity or something like that. But just try to keep fairly current in the course, and don't let this stuff slide till toward the end, because it's just going to be way too much for you to do. But other than that, yes, map on. And again, feel free to contact me anytime. I am on travel about a third to half of the time. In fact, I'm coming out to Chicago next week, to your part of the world. And I know not all of you are in Chicago, but I'm looking forward to working with several different universities, and even one school and a community college out there. So looking forward to that. But meanwhile, folks, this is an exciting time to be into this. So I really salute you for your vision, your energy, your expertise, and I just wish you all the best. Keep up the good work, folks. We will keep in touch, and we'll see you online. Thanks.